What is happening, podcast people? It's Blair Johnson with the Badass Records podcast, here to remind you, if you don't already know, episodes drop Thursdays. You can subscribe on YouTube or where you stream/download your audio. Keep up with the pod on Twitter and Instagram. BadassRecordsPodcast.com is the site. BadassRecordsPodcast@gmail.com is how you get a hold of me. This thing is one-on-one, long-form conversations wherein we don't do a deep dive, but we do a shallow dive into the background of the guest, find out or explore what the guest is into these days, and we have a peek at a few of the guest's favorite records across any era or eras of his or her lifetime. Mostly this has been Kansas City folks. Entirely this has been one-on-one in-person interviews. So hit me up if you would like to do one yourself or know somebody that would be a good fit to be in the chair opposite me. Appreciate you all stopping by as always, and hope you enjoy the show. So my numbers are a little screwed up right now, but for all intents and purposes, this would be episode 126 of Badass Records podcast. Hang with Lauren Textor. How's it going?
Great.
Good to see you.
Beautiful
nice to
weather
meet
outside.
you. Yes,
Yeah.
It is. Yes, indeed. Now, I think that your smoke piece, which I came across on Instagram and then found the Pitch KC's Instagram account. I think you were credited, and then of course it appears in the online publication too. I think that's how we crossed paths initially.
Yeah.
So you are Lauren.Collette on Instagram, and in your bio there is a link to all of your Pitch KC stuff, right? It takes you right to all of it.
Yeah.
And the other piece was half of indie pop Laurentina and the Fuzz. Is that real?
That is not real. That is a fictional band that I formed with my cat last summer.
Nice.
Yeah. I love being a music journalist,
Okay.
and I was like, I would love to be a musician in a band, but I don't have any musical talent. And so
Okay.
I do photo shoots with my cat for all sorts of important events. I mean, Halloween, his birthday, he just turned 12 last week.
Wow. Okay.
So we do very elaborate photo shoots, and I make my mom go outside and take photos of us until I'm satisfied. And he's very photogenic. And so I was like, okay, well, if I was in a band, who would I want to be in a band with? And the obvious answer to me was my cat, Fred. So
Fred.
Fred.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had actually the designer for the pitch, Cassandra, I had her make some digital artwork for me, and I recently created a Substack, and so that's going to be kind of a mix of my real adventures as a journalist moving to Dublin for my master's, and also as a member of this fictional band, but it'll be written as a real account of us going on tour and making our albums. And
Wow.
yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah.
So did you say 2.5 years ago your Pitch KC
Yeah.
stint began?
I believe so. It was about 2.5 years ago. I was an intern for the summer semester with them as an editorial intern, and I worked there. I produced a lot of content that I was really proud of. And then at the end of the summer, less than a week after I finished interning at the Pitch, I left for Ireland, and I studied abroad in Cork for 4 months.
County Cork.
Yeah.
Nice.
Beautiful.
That's supposedly where my Irish roots
Oh, really?
lie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. I was there for 4 months, and when I got back, started doing some freelance work with them. And then March of 2023, they asked me if I would be the Dish and Drink KC columnist. So I have done that for the past year and then just recently wrapped that up as I'm interning now at KCUR
Okay.
on the Up to Date talk show.
Nice. Okay. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the cool thing about KCUR is that when you work on the talk show, I'm not so sure how it is in the other departments, but on the talk show, I'm treated like a producer. So I do everything from choosing the guest, choosing the topic, pre-interviewing, writing the script, getting the microphone set up, sitting in the booth, the producer's booth when someone goes on the show and making sure that we're taking calls, that we're asking the questions, cueing the clips, everything
Cool.
like that. And then I also do the audio production
Wow.
and write the podcast post when it gets posted to our website afterwards.
So is it kcur.org?
Yeah,
And the show is called
Up to Date.
Up to Date.
Yes.
And what are the call numbers for KCUR? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do not know off the top of my head.
It's not 89.3, is it?
Well, KCUR is 89.3.
89.3.
Yeah, I thought you were asking me for the number for the producer's booth, and I was like, I do not have
no,
that
no,
memorized.
No. Just if you're looking for it on your
Yeah.
on your dial in the car. Up to Date. And when does it air and what is it about?
Yeah, so we are live every morning during the 9 a.m. news hour. That's Steve Kraske on the air, who's been doing it for about 25 years,
Okay.
since the beginning of the talk show. He's amazing. He was actually one of my professors at UMKC,
Cool.
where I studied for undergrad with my
Okay.
major in English. We do all sorts of things. I mean, it's a local talk show. We have everybody on from comedians to musicians to politicians, all sorts of people on. It's definitely something different every single day, and that's what I enjoy most about it.
Monday through Friday?
Monday through
at
Friday.
9?
Yes.
So, I mean, are you able to, or have you calculate what is the time spend to make that happen 5 days
wow.
a week? And is it an hour long or half hour? Okay.
It is an hour long. There are 4 full-time producers along with Steve, and Steve does a lot of the lifting as well and working through the scripts and choosing guests and formulating pitches. And so he's very involved and has been since the show's inception. And along with that, there's me, and I'm a full-time intern, and then we have another intern who is part-time right now, who is through the university, which is pretty cool that she's able to do that and get her internship credit in that way. And honestly, I don't know, even with all of us working, I mean, we still have, like tomorrow we had 7 minutes to fill for the show, and so we were like, okay, does anybody have an idea for these 7 minutes? I would say I work on my pitches for probably 5 or 6 hours for each pitch, just from the time that it takes me to track down a guest and do the background research.
A pitch is?
A pitch is when you're formulating an idea for the show. You have a pitch document and you're like, okay, this is how we contact these people. Here's their phone numbers, here's their email, here's what I learned from them in the pre-interview. Here are the questions that we're going to ask them. Here are clips that we want to play. Here are things that might not make it into the questions but are good to know as background.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a pitch to like a manager saying, "Hey, here's what we would like to do, and we need you to approve it or not approve it." It's kind of the bones of the actual show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically we do pitches in a morning meeting as well when we just kind of throw out ideas, but it's almost always yes. It's a very awesome team that just allows everyone to have a lot of creative direction. I mean, to take their own creative direction and have a lot of integrity in the work that they produce. So if you're like, I think this would be a good idea, I think I can do it, I think I know the right people for it, it's almost always yes,
Cool.
go do it.
Wow. So what does the audio editing look like for you?
Yeah, so I had never been involved in any kind of audio editing before I started here, which is why I'm interning. So we use the Adobe suite.
Okay.
Mostly I use Adobe Audition, and then we use Omni Studios to place ads. We use NPR's Grove system to go ahead and write the content, and if you need to edit that audio a little bit further, you need to say how long it is in order to place it in a web post. That's kind of the back end of things.
Okay. So I mean, this is a full-time job.
Yes.
And you're all the hours that you log each day are pointed right in the direction of putting this thing and keeping this thing on the air.
Yes.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
I am a little embarrassed that I missed that piece. I don't know. I guess I should have poked around a little more in other places besides the pitch, Casey, and Instagram. But
Yeah, it's relatively newer. I have been putting it on my muck rack profile, and so that's been a really great resource for me. But the thing about doing these shows, these broadcast shows, and even podcasting them is that it doesn't automatically pop up on websites like muck rack, which are so great at tracking your digital pieces. You have to go in and manually put those in and put your clips in. And so
okay, well, we need. I think I know there's a couple decades plus difference in age between us. So muckrack.
yeah.
I'm no idea what that is.
All right. Yeah, it's a platform for journalists and PR professionals. And so it's awesome because it automatically keeps track of most of your articles. Like I said, I do have to put in my clips from Casey or myself, but it just updates the list automatically. And so when I was doing a column every single week for the pitch, it was great because I didn't have to keep track of that myself for my resume. I could just have it all loaded on there, and if they happened to miss something, I would just message the team. They have a really quick response time, and they would get it
pitches
uploaded
team.
for me. The Muckracks team.
Oh,
yeah.
my bad. So when you produce an edition of Up to Date and then podcast it, what's going to Muckrack? Is it just the verbiage that summarizes the podcast or the episode or the show, or what all goes on there?
Yeah, so if you put in your link, it'll come up with the headline, the description automatically, and then normally it might include a little bit of the body so people know what they're getting into when they read it. It'll have your featured image on it, and then it'll have the link for all the other content so people can go ahead and listen. And that's typically the easiest place to find just about any journalist's work now.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you now, if you don't mind, and if you forget, I totally understand. But I would love for you to send me your link if that's a thing, people, just so I can see. I mean, I kind of understand, but nevertheless, thank you so much for being here. That's very cool stuff. So you're born and raised in the area?
I was,
okay.
Yeah.
And did you grow up in KCK?
I did. I went to Piper High School.
Piper. Nice. Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Yeah.
Siblings?
I do. I have 2 younger sisters.
Okay. And any idea how mom and dad met?
They met through a Christian singles group.
Okay.
At the church where I grew up going to, St. Pat's in KCK. So they played volleyball together.
What are the crossroads of St. Pat's? Do you know?
I do not remember.
Okay. Downtown-ish? Or?
We're all kind of situated over by the Legends.
Okay.
So it's right around that Legends area. My dad is a firefighter, so it was near the fire station that he used to work at. He had he grew up in Shawnee as a kid.
Okay.
And then moved to KCK,
Gotcha.
Just a little jump away
Yeah.
for firefighting. And so he's with the KCK department still, and that's the church they went to.
Right on. So were they folks that put on music to listen to in the home when y'all were little?
My mom is very big on listening to the radio. I mean, she was a stay-at-home mom until I was probably about 12.
Okay.
And so she had the radio on just in the car. She was always taking us to children's museums and the public pool in the summer. The radio was always on. She's a big classic rock fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
My dad, not so much. I don't think he's really a music person very much at all.
Okay. So one thing that's interesting to me to think about is, when you're sort of coming online as a small person and realizing, okay, this is our home, this is our family, and here's some music that mom and dad listen to, and then eventually, you sort of start carving out your own musical taste path. So I'm curious, aside from stuff that's on your list, if there is an album that you first remember falling in love with, or maybe one that you bought with your own money for the first time, or borrowed from a buddy. Anything stick out?
Yeah, I'd have to say Taylor Swift's Speak Now.
Really?
My sisters and I were all big Swifties growing up. I actually
Past
remember...
tense there.
Well, I can't say that I'm the biggest fan of her newest release. Not so much my speed, but definitely as a kid, I remember being in 5th grade and we had this project. It was like, who is your hero? And I remember I made a poster about Taylor Swift.
Wow.
And I
Speak
loved
Now
her.
is for number 1 or number 2?
I think it's number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, I should know, but
Yeah.
So, can we hang out in that lane of the new release for a minute? Do you
Yeah,
mind sharing
definitely.
how many full listens have you given it?
I've given it 2 passes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and
I can't say it's an album with no skips for me. I feel like
Sure.
her other work felt more relatable to me. Yeah, I mean, even Midnights, which initially when I listened to Midnights, I was like, I don't think this is really my thing. I don't think it's really my speed. I prefer her older work. Midnights definitely grew on me. I think that
Me too.
there was still great songwriting, and it's still, I think sad girl pop has really had its moment, and it's still continuing to have a moment. And I mean, Phoebe Bridgers, Lorde, who is on my list of albums, it's it's a mood. I mean, I think there's something about, especially the age that I'm at now, feeling like 23.
23, yeah.
Yeah. Growing up and looking at the world around you and realizing it's not quite what you thought it was going to be. And having that nostalgia. And there's such a nostalgia with Taylor Swift because she was my number 1 artist for so long. My sisters and I went to her concert when she was here in KC last summer.
Okay.
We put in the money and we were like, okay, just about whatever it takes, the 3 of us are going to go to this concert together because we grew up listening to her together. And it might be the last summer that we have in KC together.
Oh man.
And so that was
I'm sorry. Remind me. You have 2 sisters.
2 younger sisters.
Yeah, both younger. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so one of them is at school at the University of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay.
And then the other one is graduating from UMKC this spring.
Okay.
Next
okay.
month.
So was the show a good time?
It was an amazing time. Even the album Reputation, which was never my thing. Honestly, I found Reputation to be a little bit cringy. I'm like, you have all this money. I mean, she just became a billionaire. And I was like, and you're painting yourself as the bad guy. And I definitely am on board with how the media can demonize women. And I fully understand that. And I support female artists when they speak about that. But I do think Taylor Swift in particular has so much power. And so I wasn't a huge fan of that album. And the way that she revamped her image, obviously it was very successful, but the sound of the album wasn't for me.
Okay.
I came back around when she started re-recording her albums. Speak Now was always my favorite, and I was such a fan of that re-record. I felt like the tracks that she released from the vault were amazing. I love listening to them. But this time around, I feel like it's a lot of repetitive, and it's a kind of woe is me tone, but without the bite that Reputation had. And I think
So there is some value in Reputation for
there
you.
is, and seeing it perform live, I mean, it was amazing live. She had an amazing setup, amazing backup dancers. Everything was so synchronized, and that made me realize the way that Reputation is meant to be listened to, at least for me, is live
Okay.
in a concert.
And what was getting tickets like for the 3 of you?
My youngest sister is definitely the biggest Swiftie.
Okay.
I hope she doesn't mind me saying that she used to run a Taylor Swift fan account that was
Cool.
pretty huge online.
No kidding.
On Instagram and
Not
on
any-
Twitter.
No more though.
I think she's grown out of it.
Like she created it. She wasn't asked to do it.
No, she created
Okay,
it. It was
okay.
her
And it
pet
just
project.
grew.
It grew and grew and grew, and I don't think it's a thing anymore.
Okay.
At least I haven't heard anything about it for a very long time.
What kind of followers are we talking?
Hundreds of
Okay.
thousands.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. There's so many Taylor Swift fan accounts. You can do really well for yourself on a corner of the internet if you cater to that
was
audience.
monetizable for her.
I don't think that she did monetize it. I think this was back in 2016, 2017.
And that
So-
necessarily wasn't on everybody's minds, right? Or she was too young, or
I think she was too young.
Okay.
Because I was about 16. My
Oh, yeah.
sister's 4 years younger than
okay.
me.
Oh yeah.
So
Wow. So
she was really dedicated. She did it for the love of Taylor Swift.
And what was what kind of device was she using to put? And did your parents have any kind of screen time rule or?
Not really. She was just on her iPod. She was just doing it all on her iPod, I think. The internet was a lot less glamorous then, and you didn't have to have very high quality things. She would just post her opinions on
You could
different
get
albums.
on the internet from an iPod?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So she would just get on Instagram and she would just be posting about different albums. She would be posting Taylor Swift memes, her thoughts on Taylor's various boyfriends, and this really took off for her.
Did she ever find herself in a situation where somebody was being icky or creepy or scary or anything like that?
If
with
that was the
comments?
case, she never talked about it to me.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, there's got to be people commenting.
Yeah, I'm sure that there were haters. I was not allowed to follow the account, so I heard things about it.
What?
She
Whose
never
rule is that?
Her rule. She never ever told me what it was called, so I could only speculate. And she would tell me about what kind of reach she was getting.
What kind of big sister are you? You're supposed to be able to tell them what to do, right?
No, they don't.
Hey.
They don't listen to me.
Oh man. Okay. Well, that's really cool. So, has seeing music live been a part of your fabric all your life? Was there an early concert that stands out, or?
My mom and dad don't go out a whole lot. I think they're kind of homebodies. And so the first concert that I recall going to, aside from like Mr. Stinky Feet,
Right.
was
He's still doing it. He was just at my kid's school a couple weeks ago.
He's prolific. So the first concert that I recall going to, other than that, was a Journey tribute concert.
Okay.
Journey was my favorite band for the longest time. And I actually, once I started working and got a little bit money of my own, I took my mom to Journey and Def Leppard's concert when they came to Kansas City, I think back in 2018.
Okay. Where was this Journey tribute concert held?
It might have been at T-Mobile.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure. It's kind of a blur for me back then. I mean, I've been to a lot of concerts since then, but that was my first big one.
Okay.
So that was very exciting.
So, high school in KCK, and then UMKC for undergrad?
Yeah.
Okay. So, where along, the journey does the notion of writing begin to resonate with you?
I always wanted to write. I have a little card from my preschool teachers that says, "Come back and see us when you become a famous writer." And it was signed from both of them. And I can remember... Preschool.
You wrote something?
Well, I didn't know how to write yet, so I would do little wave-shaped sketches in my notebooks, and I would fill notebooks full of this. And I didn't realize that it wasn't actual writing and that no one else could read it when I was that young. I thought I was writing. And so I only really knew how to write my own name, and for the rest of it, I would just do the little wave shapes across the page.
Were you verbalizing that you wanted to write at that age?
I was. Yeah, my sisters and I had a newspaper called the Kidstown newspaper, and I was the editor.
Kidstown.
When I was probably 7.
Cool.
7 or 8.
Okay.
We had that, and I still have little notebook stories. Some of them are just a couple pages stapled together a lot of them are scary stories, or what would be scary to a 7-year-old, about vampires and ghosts and things like that hanging out in graveyards. And they're not very good, but they did have illustrations that accompanied them.
Nice.
And I really love to look back on them.
Cool.
Because I've always loved it, and I always wanted to do that. I was on my high school's newspaper. I was the editor-in-chief my senior year. I think that's probably one of the only things that has stayed constant in my life, is that I always wanted to write, and that's pretty much the only thing I ever wanted to do.
Okay. So, I love this. A lot of similarities. I mean, I've got a maybe 7-year-old story of mine as a 7-year-old. That was AWOL for a good while, but in a recent move, my mom, we found it in a box, and I was so excited that its whereabouts were known again. And then I read it, and I was like, "Oh my god, so bad."
Yeah.
And my kids were like, "What what is wrong with you?" I'm like, or maybe they were saying, "Now we finally understand what's wrong with you." Anyway, so I love those anecdotes from the way back, but was there a moment where you were kind of like, okay, for real, like, and to where you want to like sit down and start that first serious bit of writing that's not for a class, it's not for a freelance, it's just you doing you. Have you had that experience? And if so, when?
When I was 17, I started writing not my first novel, but the first one that I really committed to. And so I ended up finishing that when I was 19. And I still have it. I did 6 or 7 full rewrites, full drafts where I went back.
Seriously?
It's completely changed from the first version.
Writing is easy. The editing is the hard part, right?
Exactly. So it's changed a lot, but I still have that and I'm still hoping to do something with it someday. I had a whole series planned, and the second one I did get started on, and I think that was around the time when I started taking journalism more seriously, because no one had ever told me that I couldn't be a writer. I was very lucky for that. My family, even my parents who weren't very educated themselves and didn't go to college, and they really pushed me when I was a kid, and they were like, school is so important. You're going to go to college one day, you're going to do this. And they sent me to writing camp when I was a kid. I went to Duke Tips creative writing program twice, and that was expensive. I got a scholarship, but it was still a couple $1,000s. And
Duke
Tip. I don't think it's around anymore.
Okay.
But it was a thing for a while. If you scored so high on your ACT, they would send you an application.
Okay.
So I got in 3 years, and I was able to go for 2 years. And that was really pivotal to me because I had these great writing instructors who were actually published authors who were telling me, yes, you can do this. Yes, your work does have promise.
Where did this thing take place?
The first one I went to in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, wow.
At Trinity University.
Okay.
And then the second one I went to on Duke's campus.
Duke University? Oh,
yeah,
like
Duke
Blue Devils in
Winston,
the Raleigh, whatever. I forget where Duke is, but I know
Durham.
Durham. There you go. So, I mean, are you getting on a plane for these?
My parents drove me both times.
Wow. And is this an overnight thing?
It's 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
3 weeks
So
long.
where do they put you up? On campus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the dorms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. What are the ages for the 2 years that you're going to that?
Yeah, the first one, 13 or 14.
Okay.
Probably 14. The second one, I think it was 15 because I met a boy and I was so excited that I was like, wow, I'm almost 16 and I'm going to have a boyfriend and this is exactly what I wanted my life to be. And yeah, so.
So, I mean, are they driving you down there and then coming home and then coming back to pick you up?
Yeah.
Wow, it's a lot of windshield time.
Yeah,
And
it was.
2 younger sisters had to make both trips?
No, my dad would take me down and then my family would come and they would spend a couple days.
Oh, fun. Make a little
Yeah.
vacation out of it?
Yeah, and then
Cool.
they would pick me up and we would drive home.
Okay. All right. So did you do well academically in all of the areas for high school and
Yeah.
even okay. I don't know if that's I mean the writer thing has always been there. I don't know if I could date it back to preschool, but for a long time. And it, sophomore-ish, junior year, probably more like, tail end sophomore, the things like math and science started getting hard enough for me that I was like, I don't want anything to do with any of these things, because it's very frustrating. I had been, a pretty good student almost all my life, and it was like, why now? Like, I'm I have a job. I'm driving. Like, girls are a thing, and now all of a sudden learning is it was kind of like. Not necessarily let's move these things aside and focus on writing and literature and that sort of stuff, but it for sure was where I need to see the light at the end of the tunnel on when I have to participate in these subjects. And then the writing piece kind of developed out of that, or continued to develop out of that. So you're essentially like going through all of middle school and high school with a large portion of confidence in this is what I want to do and who I want to be. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you choose UMKC because
It was the biggest scholarship. I got the Casey Scholars Scholarship, and I was awarded that, and that was $50,000.
whoa.
So it's $10,000 a year for up to 5 years if you decide to go that long. And so that covered everything. I'm really, really lucky I don't have any debt because I worked through school. I had a couple different jobs, and
Yeah.
I worked in high school, and I was able to make it out, which is really one of the biggest factors in why I am able to go and do this master's program, is because I have the savings to pay for most of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to tell you, I borrowed 100% for undergrad, and then ended up going to UMKC and getting a master's in creative writing, and borrowed 100% for that too. And it is not even close to rear view. It is right here. It's crippling. It's saddening. But I'm one of who knows how many folks in the same. It sucks.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade either my undergrad or my grad experience for anything, but for lucky for sure. That's
Yeah.
great. So as you're, did you know grad school was in the cards for you even before you started undergrad, or did this happen at some point during undergrad?
Yeah, I'm a first generation student, so it wasn't like anyone was telling me you have to do this. And my parents were also very much of the opinion. I mean, my dad had become a firefighter, he had never gone to college, and my mom had worked or gone to beautician school for a little bit and not finished, and decided that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom when she married my dad and had me. And so they really prioritized education, and they were like, you should go to college, but it wasn't like you have to go to college.
That's cool.
And it was cool of them. And I always thought I would go and get my MFA in creative writing. That was my goal from the time that I was going to Duke Tip as a 14-year-old. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so that has changed a little bit just because of the experience that I've gone in as an undergrad, but I'm still going for writing, which I think is pretty awesome.
Okay. So at what point are you, I mean, were there other programs and universities in the mix with this Dublin situation? And if so, what were they?
Yeah, I only applied to schools in Ireland for my master's degree. I met my boyfriend while I was studying abroad in 2022 in Cork.
Okay.
And I loved Cork.
Yeah.
I always had the idea that one day I was going to move to Ireland because I grew up hearing so many family stories about it. My grandfather on my dad's side worked for TWA, and so he got airline passes where he could take the kids over there, and all they really had to pay for was housing. And so my dad went to Ireland quite a few times, either as a kid or when he was in the military. He was always saying, I want to take you girls to Ireland someday. My aunt studied abroad in Ireland in the 70s, and she was in Galway. And so she was always telling me stories about that and where she stayed and how beautiful it was. And that was my first choice for study abroad. So when I ended up getting in and I went over there, I was telling everybody, I was like, well, I'm going to get married over there. I was like, I'm going to meet somebody and I'm going to get married and I'm going to get citizenship and I'm going to stay over there. And I met my boyfriend within about 3 weeks.
No kidding?
3 weeks of being over there. We've been together for a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how, what does he do?
He is in his master's program also at Dublin City University.
Okay.
He's studying mechatronics engineering. And so he's going to be a robotics engineer.
Whoa. That's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
If you pay any mind to, AI and robots are going to end all employment, and he's making them.
Yeah, we have some disagreements on that.
Oh boy, well, and 1,000% uninformed. Like that's, That's not even real information. It's just
Yeah.
something I pulled out of nowhere. But
Yeah.
so he'll be a good ways through his program when you're starting yours.
He'll be finished
He'll
with
be
his
finished.
program.
Okay. Okay. And so for a year and a half, how many times have you guys been able to visit?
We've had 4 visits.
4.
I've been over there twice. He's been over here
Hey,
twice.
nice and even.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you guys have met each other's family or?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was studying abroad, I was over there for Christmas because it was cheaper that way to leave just before New Year's and stay for Christmas. And we had been dating for probably about a month officially. And he was like, hey, I told my parents about you and they want to know if you want to come over for Christmas. And I was like, oh, that's kind of heavy. I've never met the parents before. And I think it was just a time when I was saying yes to a lot of things. I was like, I'm already here. We're already going out. And I knew from the beginning, I was like, I want to do long distance. I really like him. And also, I had told everybody that I was going to get married.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was like, I need this to work. And he was a little bit less sure about long distance for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very logical about everything. And so that was a big thing for him.
He's a robotics engineer.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was like, okay, well, if you want to come over, just let me know. And so I ended up spending 5 days with them over
Wow.
Christmas. And I love them, love his family.
He has siblings too?
He has one younger brother.
One younger brother.
Yeah.
Cool. Very nice. So this first novel that got 5 rewrites, you started at 17 and finished
Yeah.
at 19?
Yes.
So you're you're finishing high school and starting undergrad while doing this?
Yes.
Like, were you also working? Were you
Yes.
social? Were you doing activity? How do you
Yeah.
have time for that?
I always ask myself, once any period of my life ends, I think with the pitch and working full-time at KCUR and doing the column every single week, and then I also freelance for bands through town and do some personal projects as well, and I was applying to grad school, and I always ask myself, once something ends, like now when I'm no longer writing for the pitch, I always ask myself, how did I do that? And it seems so exhausting now looking back. How did I do that? How did I do it in high school when I was applying for colleges and working and everything else? And I think there's no good answer for it. I think I just do it.
Save all your fun for the weekend.
Yeah,
You just
I think
stay busy and focused and work and
if I love what I do, I think it's easier to make that time for it and prioritize things. And yeah, I'm not a great multitasker, but I am great at being like, I'm going to submit some poems for this. This is something I really want to do. I'm going to make the time to do it. And I look at the deadline, and normally it's the day before, but I do it. And yeah, I just keep doing stuff. Even when I'm exhausted,
Wow.
I think I just do it.
yeah, hence the too tired for anything additional during the week. Right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So this program is an MFA?
It's not an MFA.
Okay.
It's a master's in journalism.
Master's in journalism.
Yeah.
Okay. Right around the time, so I did. By the way, both of my grandparents were pilots for TWA.
Wow.
And newspaper in high school, newspaper in college, radio show in college, UMKC for my master's. And right around the time I was finishing that, there were talks already a good ways in the works to revamp the MA in creative writing and make the program MFA, which meant that it was a terminal degree. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Do I come back for that? And they're like, no, don't do that. And I was like, but there's also PhDs. And they're like, well, the MFA is like a equivalent to a P. And I was just like, I don't. I'd love to keep doing more school, but not in the cards at that time anyway. So 2 years? It's a 2-year program?
It's a 1-year program.
It's a 1-year program.
Yeah.
How many credit hours?
Their credit hours work differently over there, so
Okay.
honestly I couldn't tell you.
Sure.
It might be
30
something
or
like
something?
30.
Yeah, okay.
I'd imagine.
And then will you have to put together a thesis or a portfolio, or is there a final big thing?
Yeah, you can choose between doing a thesis or a final project.
Okay.
And there's a 6-week internship program built into it, which is why I ended up going with that program in that school. It's because I get placement. I won't
Once
really
you're
know
done.
anybody over there. No, during the course.
Oh, so you'll
Yeah,
take
during the course.
full load and be an intern?
Yes, and it's paid as well. It's a paid
Okay.
internship, which is
Okay.
awesome.
Very cool. So, with that being the case, plus the financial situation that you mentioned a little bit ago, you won't necessarily need to work,
No,
right?
not necessarily.
Which means you can, focus,
Yeah.
like for real, on precisely all the things that you have. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's just worked out really well. I did plan it, but if I had
Right.
planned it actively, it couldn't have worked out any
Right.
better.
So how did the food and drink, what was the title for the pitch?
Dish and Drink Casey.
Dish and Drink. How did that position come to be for you?
Yeah, I think they just liked my writing. I hadn't really done much food writing for them. I'd done an article or two while I was an intern. And I was on a trip with my sisters in California. We were actually just about to board the ferry for Catalina Island, and I got a call from the pitch.
Oh, is this when you said like a week after you finished something was when you
I got back from study abroad, and then it was a couple months later because I got back end of December. It was in March when I got the call.
Okay.
I was on spring break.
Okay.
And so we went to California for our spring break, and that was the first big trip that we've taken, the three of us together, just the three of us.
Fun.
Yeah,
Nice.
I was really excited. We were boarding the ferry, and I got this call, and it was from Brock, the editor-in-chief, and
Wait, was
the
his
managing editor.
number saved in your phone already?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I saw it, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, did I mess something up? I was like, I must have messed something up on these freelance articles, and I answered. I was like, hello? And they were like, hey, is now a good time to talk? And I was like, well, I'm about to board a boat, but like we can talk real quick. And they were like, okay, well, would you want to be the Dish and Drink Casey columnist? And I remember saying, I was like, the only experience that I have in food writing is with you guys, and I've barely done any of it. I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about food.
You said this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were like, oh, well, you'll figure it out. You're a great writer. You'll figure it out. It's like, just look at some of the previous articles that we've published, and it's not really that hard. You can do it. I mean, like, we believe in you. You'll figure it out. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay.
And so
Is paid?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I got back, and then I just
Have they found
started
your
doing
replacement already?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Okay.
I know Sarah Sipple, who is the food editor, did the column last week.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are there parameters? So you're putting a weekly piece together, and are the parameters for your weekly piece the same from week to week, or do they say, hey, this week we're going to send you? What does that experience look like?
Yeah, the pitch is pretty open. So I would basically choose any restaurant. I normally did 2 restaurants a week. Any restaurant that I was interested in, and I would go and I would pick anything off the menu that I was interested in. And I had a budget for the month, but pick whatever I wanted to order, and I would take photos, and then I would write about it afterwards.
Just
And
photos with your phone?
Just with my phone.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never had a camera of my own.
Sure.
So Yeah.
And would you go solo? Would you mix it up and sometimes go with folks and say, hey, I got to have a separate tab?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
I would take my mom quite a bit with me, but
Okay.
I'm comfortable doing things on my own. So I would
Sure.
go even fancier places. I would go dine by myself. I mean, I would make a reservation. I would go alone because that doesn't really bother me. I'd bring a book or something, and I'd just read, or I'd hang out at the bar a lot and just kind of make small talk with the bartender and learn about their life. And yeah, sometimes I would bring my mom or my friends or my sisters, but
Sure. And would you tell your server, the bartender, anybody what you were doing?
Never.
Never.
No.
Did anybody ever like, hey, I know we.
Yeah, sometimes people would be like, oh, well, mostly what they would say is, oh, are you an influencer? I would be like, oh, I don't really think of myself as an influencer. And normally I would say, oh, no, I just like to write Yelp reviews for places that I go. I mean, it was always small businesses, like locally owned. And so I'd be like, no, I just like to write Yelp reviews and bring people's attention to a place. But, and I do that too. But
Sure, right.
yeah,
And then Bands Through Town.
yeah.
How is that also over now, or is it ongoing? And how did it begin? What did it look like?
Yeah, it is ongoing because it's a quarterly publication. So
Okay.
not as much work, not as frequent. Corey reached out to me through LinkedIn because he had seen some of my pitch pieces, and I don't remember which one it was, but I do music articles for the pitch. I'd frequently do concert reviews or interviews with different artists, a lot of them local, and that was really exciting to me. I really enjoyed music writing, but I didn't really think of myself as a music writer until Corey reached out to me and said, hey, I really like your work. Would you be open to writing for me sometime? Here's the magazine that I put together. Here's what a typical story looks like. And so I've written for, I think, 4 issues for them now.
Okay.
And
Corey's the editor.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I have the cover story for this upcoming issue. I have
Congrats.
the back cover for the last issue.
Cool.
And yeah, and I have an additional piece in this one as well, and a couple album reviews that I'm working on.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
But that's not also not in your IG bio. Is
It's
that
on-
by design?
It's
or?
on my muck rack. I think
muck rack.
I'm gonna have to take the pitch out and put my muck rack in instead.
Okay. Fair
yeah,
enough.
because that has everything in
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Now, are they giving you assignments? Bands Through Town? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, they do ask me to do specific assignments,
Okay.
specific concerts.
Yep.
Normally, it's kind of an offering. It's like, here's what I have available. What are you most interested in?
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
cool. And then solo for those.
Yeah.
And are you pen and paper? Are you taking notes? Like how are you documenting your thoughts and observations and so forth?
Yeah, I do take notes. I record my interviews, which is really helpful. I just use Otter to automatically record everything, and that's great because it's not always the most accurate transcription, but it does help.
This is an app spelled like the animal, Otter? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fascinating. I'm learning so much.
Yeah.
Now, but I mean, does he set up the interviews? And then there's a space
Yeah.
where you can meet whoever and do the thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just go on in. A lot of the time it's in the green room. I interviewed LA Witch. That was my first interview for Bands Through Town, and we did our interview just walking around Kansas City. They wanted to see some of the murals, and our photographer wanted to get shots of them in motion. And so we walked and talked.
So your pieces for Bands Through Town sometimes come with a photographer too?
Yeah. Which is
Okay.
pretty awesome that I don't have to do all that.
Yeah.
They haven't asked me to take pictures yet, which is good. I'm trying to get some camera training in, but yeah, I don't have my own camera, so that's an investment that I'm going to have to make.
Sure. So concert reviews, interviews, any other types of assignments for your gig with Bands Through Town?
No, that's
Okay.
it. Just album reviews, concert reviews.
And what does
interviews.
doing a concert review look like for you in terms of, do you take notes and then immediately when you get home try to put something down while it's fresh, or?
Yeah, I am that annoying person in a concert venue that has their phone out, and it's because I'm frantically typing notes in my notes app.
Yep.
So I do that. I do take videos as well because I think hearing the music again, the way that it was performed at the venue helps me get a sense of place and recall things sometimes more vividly than my notes can.
You'll re-listen to a show once you're home.
Yeah.
You're recording the audio with your phone too? Mm-hmm. Just in what?
Just with my iPhone camera, with my videos.
Well, okay, in snippets. You're not recording the whole show.
No.
Okay,
No.
I was like, how do you have memory for that?
No, definitely not.
Okay,
Yeah, I record the parts that I think are most notable. If the artist starts talking to the crowd, a lot of the time I either take notes or record that because I find that really sets a tone. And people from Kansas City love to hear artists shout them out. They love to be like, hey, Kansas City, we're
Yeah.
so excited to be here. People love that. So,
Well, I agree, and I think that they do love it. They love that for what it is, but also, uh, I think it's somewhat widely agreed upon here locally that Kansas City is looked over as a show destination spot by a lot of artists.
definitely.
Stand up seems to be a little bit better, but musically, it's like I can't tell you how many times a year, whatever. So and so's on tour, and it's like really, Denver and St. Louis. What a surprise!
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure that that's true. Loving the shout outs. So the pitch stuff, bands through town stuff. Are there any other writing endeavors that you have going on, or?
There is my personal blog on Substack now, Laurentina and the Fuzz.
Hey, okay. All right. So Substack, long form, right?
Yes.
And is there some kind of encouragement? Is there a pay situation for Substack, or is it?
Yeah, you can do paid subscribers. I'm not to that point yet, having just launched it a few weeks ago.
Okay. So you can create one and do your thing and not charge folks.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden you get real popular, that's when you throw it on there. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, let's try to.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can do different tiers as well. So you can be like, okay, these posts are free if you want behind the scenes content, or you can do podcasts as well on Substack now.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, you can be like, okay, it's $5 a month to unlock this level, kind of like Patreon.
Patreon. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you launched that when?
Just about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks. How many posts are up?
Only 2.
Hey, one a week.
Yeah.
That's a good.
Yeah.
Have you ever blogged?
I have. I had a Tumblr
Okay.
back in the day.
Okay. Is it gone?
It is gone because it was embarrassing.
Oh.
It is gone. It was mostly, and you know what? I think fan fiction is a very valid medium of self-expression, and I think I credit a lot of that with making me a better writer. Not having to worry so much about the plot or anything, but really focusing on character studies.
Sure.
And I did write a lot of fan fiction, a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan fiction. And I had a Wattpad back in 2014. That's what all the cool literary nerds had. Wattpad. Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Wattpad.
And it does what?
You would post things on it. Authors would actually post original content on it. I think Neil Gaiman might have had one. He also has as far as I know, still a pretty active Tumblr. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you would do all sorts of things on it. I published a lot of fan fiction on that as well as some original work. I wouldn't say that it would be something that I would be proud to publish now, having written it when I was 14. But, I had, couple reads, a couple reads, like in the thousands. I think my most popular one got to like 300,000 reads.
Cool.
But yeah, so I think that's a really great way when there wasn't a whole lot of failure associated with it. And it wasn't people that I knew who were reading it. And so it was just a way for me to really exercise those writing muscles.
All the better. If 100% of your audience can be 0 people that you know.
Yeah.
That's the secret ingredient to cutting loose,
Yeah.
right? You're not worried about anything. Anyway, okay, so you've done some Tumblr. You have a Substack now. You have the first completed novel that may be part of a series.
Yeah.
Visions or ideas for other things that you want to tackle at some point, writing-wise?
Yeah, I've been submitting poetry for a couple years now, just to different magazines. I've only had them published so far, and I wasn't super rigorous with poetry submissions. Only had them published so far in UMKC's number one magazine.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I also write research papers. I did an undergrad anyway. I'm hoping to do more of that in my master's program, and I had 3 of those published with UMKC's undergraduate research journal, Lucerna. That was really exciting.
Research papers.
Yeah.
How do you have the brain to write Buffy the Vampire fan fiction and research paper? I mean,
Yeah.
because one sounds exciting and adventurous, and the other sounds dry and dull.
Yeah.
I'm probably not right in that, but you can shift gears and do both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Research. Initially going into it, I wasn't really thinking that I was going to like it, and I wasn't thinking that I was going to publish anything with it. I think almost any time that I see a publishing opportunity, though, at some point I'm going to hop on that.
Sure.
And so for me, sophomore year, I wrote this paper for one of my courses about how art programming in prisons impacts the recidivism rate. And I thought it was really interesting. And because just the kind of person that I am and the kind of style that I was, I didn't just read previously published papers and draw from that. I actually interviewed people from the Topeka Correctional Facility, and
how'd you get access?
I just called and emailed people. I just kept calling.
Sure. Hey, it's Lauren again.
Yeah, I just kept calling until someone
today,
was
Bruce?
like, okay.
God,
Yeah. And so there's, I forget what it's called. There's a national program as well, an art program that works to connect art supplies with prisoners and celebrate their work and make it well known. And I interviewed their founder as well and included her in that paper, and quite a few different volunteers from different facilities. Talked to someone from the Leavenworth facility who had done that kind of work, someone who had worked in art programming with prisoners on death row. And so I published that in the undergraduate journal, turned that in for submission, and it got published.
Cool.
And then the year after that, I did it again. And that one, I'm really interested in women in horror and domestic horror and what that looks like. And
domestic horror.
Yeah. So
not akin to domestic violence.
No.
Okay.
Well, sometimes.
Okay.
You'd think about it. Stephen King's The Shining is a great example. And so it's a subgenre that women traditionally dominated. I mean, you'd think Shirley Jackson and The Haunting of Hill House, things like that. And so women wrote about their own experiences and kind of, I mean, whether thinly veiled or not, about hauntings and the way that they felt their house was haunted. I mean, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, The Yellow Wallpaper.
Okay.
That's a story about a woman going slowly mad because she is so controlled by the people in her life, and that's a great example of domestic horror. And so I wrote a paper about that, about Catherine Mansfield, and this short story that she wrote called The Daughters of the Late Colonel. And that's another example of the subgenre where these women feel victimized by their father even after he's died, and about the hold that he has over them and how they feel like they're too old to take control of their lives, and what do they even do now that he's gone, because he's been there their whole lives telling them what to do. And now that they have this freedom, is it even freedom at all, because they still feel caged by his memory. So I published that. I was really proud of that. And then this last time I published this paper that I wrote while in Cork about women in punk rock.
Oh.
Yeah, specifically women in punk rock from Ireland and the UK.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I remember at some point in my master's program, the harsh realization that fiction, that's my lane. Most not that there's a formula, right? But so if you have, for the sake of nice round numbers, a 300-page novel. Let's say it takes you 6 months to write it, and then 18 you're editing and rewriting and so on and so forth. And then, there's the business end of getting it to where all the places it needs to be. So you wind up right around, 2.5, 3 years, whatever it is. And you find out that most folks that have written something that people have liked and encourage them to keep writing stuff, there was like 1.5 years or 2 years of research before they sat down to write it, their fiction piece. And it's like, what was that last part? And if you pause and think about it for a second, it's true. Like, you uh, the stuff that you can make up or put pen and paper to just straight out of your brain is a pretty small scope. So if you want to develop characters and have fascinating storyline pieces, like you got to go learn about whatever the thing is, right? And it can
Yeah.
take longer than it takes you to write it.
Yeah.
So daunting, fascinating, intriguing, to think about, how by the time you, you have the idea. I'm going to write this story. It's about this girl named Lauren. And she's going to, I got to figure out, but I know that much. To the time that it's done is this chunk of your life. And when you start the next project, your life might be considerably different. And so you get, let's say you write 10 novels and one day you're being interviewed by some knucklehead on a podcast and they're asking you questions about novel 2. You're like, I mean, that was such a different time in my life, but you all growing up and learning about literature and writing and all these, Mark Twain, he was just this person, all, he never adapted or changed or grew. He wrote here, I can tell you all the books that he wrote. And then you're like, oh no, he was probably a different dude in some semblance for every, I don't know. It's a fascinating notion. Well, it sounds like you've got yourself busy and committed through at least age 30. You got a lot of stuff going on, but all of it sounds very exciting. So, congrats on getting ready to start the program and the internship that will come with it. And congrats on concluding your stint with the pitch. I would suspect that a lot of these relationships that you have created, maybe they bubble up again at some point down the road, right?
Thank you. I think so too.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for being here. Thank you for sending me your list. I usually just run through them in chronological release order. So if we do that, Year of the Cat.
Yeah.
Al Stewart, 1976, 7th of 16 for him, 9 tracks, 38 minutes. Scottish folk rock.
Yeah.
With to me, almost the second I hit play, I'm getting big Bowie vibes.
Yeah.
At least for track 1, which was cool. Cool sound to it. I'd never heard of Al Stewart before. So who is he, and what's special about Year of the Cat for you, aside from the fact that you're in a band with your cat?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the last days, if not the last day that I was in Ireland, my boyfriend and I went to this record shop and we were just kind of looking through, and I was like, I have €10 left in cash and I want you to have it, and I want you to spend it on a record that we can use to kind of commemorate this time. Yeah.
That's cool.
And so we went and we were like, okay, what's a record that we can get under €10? And he was kind of flipping through the different ones. He was like, oh, I love this album. And I had never heard of it before, and it was Year of the Cat. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's your choice, whatever you want to get. And then on the plane home, I was listening to it on repeat. I had a very long plane ride and I was very sad. And so it felt like a way to kind of stay connected to him. And I was just really blown away. I mean, most of all by the title track. I think it's really gorgeous. Running like a watercolor in the rain, he sings. And I think that's just a beautiful description of someone that you love and someone that you admire. And I don't know, I really loved the way that he was able to pull that in. I felt like I was there watching this woman run away from him.
Is boyfriend 23-ish also?
Yeah.
Okay.
He is.
Cool.
And I think also just the interviews that I've seen with Al Stewart, he just seems like a nice guy.
Sure.
And that's something that I
he looks
really...
nice in his picture.
Yeah, that's something that when I listen to people, and I'll get into this more with Tom Petty, when I listen to people, I want to feel like there's someone that I could be friends with. And not just someone that I admire from afar. I think I feel icky if someone that I'm listening to has a bad track record. of just being
Life.
a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think I want to listen to the music and I want to feel only positive things about them and about their artistry and about the person that they were. Because you feel like you come to know an artist through their music, and I want that
Absolutely.
to be as true as
Yeah.
possible. Yeah.
Cool. So what did I say? He's got 15 others. Have you
Yeah.
poked around at all, or?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
a little bit. I think this definitely remains my favorite just
Sure.
because of the memories
Yeah.
associated with it. And I haven't gone too deep down the rabbit hole with him. That's definitely something that I've been saving for summer because he has a very spring summer vibe.
Yeah. Now, are you both folks that frequent record stores and buy vinyl?
We are. I used to have a record player. It was kind of a crappy one from Target that my
Okay.
sister got me for my birthday a couple years ago.
Oh, that was nice of her.
Yeah, and so
Shouts out to sister, even though you just called her gift crappy.
yeah, well, we thought that it was going to be a good one because we were like, how much should a record player cost? It was like $60. So to me, I was like, this is
should
like
function.
a great gift. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, this is awesome. And then after about a year, it stopped working, which was unfortunate. But in that time, I had bought a bunch of records and she had bought me some. And we love going to antique malls. And so we would just flip through the records and see what was on sale or what looked interesting from the cover art or the tracks on it. And my boyfriend does have a record player. And so that's in my limited amount of space, just 2 suitcases that I'm taking over there initially. I'm packing quite a few records.
Are you really?
Yeah. And
Cool.
I brought quite a few back and forth between the two of us during our trips.
Okay. That's funny. So he buys regularly. It just the way that sort of like what I was talking about when you are coming online as a young person. These are this is the record player. These are the records that mom and in the blink of an eye, vinyl was gone for me. And obviously it's been back for some time now. Does the vinyl hype and buying and selling community overseas look and feel the same as it does here, or?
I think it feels somewhat the same. I think a lot of the artists in Ireland, at least the ones that I've spoken to, and I've been lucky enough that my boyfriend's closest friend is in a band, and so I've been able to see a lot of his process and a lot of the way that he's grown just in the past year and a half. I mean, from getting gigs at Whelan's and just working his way up to that and releasing their album and their EPs and what that process has looked like, directing their music videos.
That guy got in here like 4 weeks ago.
Really?
I had the window cracked for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't see him for like 10, 11, 12 days. And then all of a sudden
you'll think he's gone.
He'll just do that and just like, where have you been? And
he's just keeping you company.
Sorry, your boyfriend's buddies in a band.
Yeah.
And seeing their process.
And so I think that they are hoping to release on vinyl someday.
Okay.
But it is kind of a big cost investment. And from what I've seen over there, the Irish music scene is pretty small. I mean, you have artists like CMAT who are just coming out and touring in the US and becoming pretty big. And of course you have U2 and the Cranberries who were huge. But I would say like in the last 20 years, there haven't been artists of that caliber coming out of
But
there
are record stores.
Are record stores.
And they have customers and they're paying their bills.
And you can buy used, but it's just not that artists who are creating in Ireland right now typically have the resources to make their own records.
Okay. Cool. So we'll do a quick 5-year leap from 76 to 81 and Time. By Electric Light Orchestra.
Yeah.
10th of 15, 13 tracks, 43 minutes. Quick hop from Scotland to England gives us the magic of Jeff Lynne and the first of 2 Traveling Wilburys on your list.
Yeah.
What's your discovery story with this one?
I grew up listening to Yellow because my mom was a huge fan. She went to a couple of their concerts.
Yeah.
She went to a couple of their concerts. She had some of their CDs in our basement. So I would comb through the CDs and I found Discovery from them. and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my sister and I, after we got my record player, we were going looking for used records, and we found Discovery on vinyl, and so I bought that immediately. I was like, this is the one that I really, really wanted. And I have yet to find Time used. But when I was working my way through their catalog, I was like, this is the best album that I have ever heard.
Digitally okay.
On Spotify.
Okay.
And it struck me. I love a narrative arc in whatever I'm reading, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, if it's something that I'm listening to, if it's a podcast, if it's music. I love a narrative arc. And I try to include a narrative arc in all aspects of my own life
Sure.
when I'm
Yeah.
journaling or now with my Substack. And this story just, I don't know, I felt like it was so creatively told, and it continues to strike me. I've listened to this album I don't know how many times, and I don't know, you can feel his pain. I mean, a man who's been transported into the future and is missing the woman that he loves, and he's surrounded by all these technologies that are really shiny and seem really wonderful and advanced, but are they really? And then he just misses home. He misses home. He misses the people that he knows, and he doesn't know how to get back.
Yeah. So I would basically just hear, for the most part, oldies in the car with my mom. At some point, we become, there is a record player, but the receiver portion, it doesn't really move from the Fox. Mm-hmm. So if there's music on, it's classic rock, whatever, So I got exposed to a lot of different artists' songs in that period, and ELO was for sure a part of that. But by the time I'm, music listening went from, everybody sitting around in the family room or whatever to I'm by myself in my room with the door shut, and I would go down cassette rabbit holes, hitting the new and used shops. And I bought, a couple of ELO albums, and typically because, I probably started with the greatest hits, and then, there was a track or two that weren't on that, and it's like, well, I've got to have access to that song, because that song. So I bought a couple, and they've always had, just a real cool vibe to them, in my opinion. But I've never, so if I'm buying an album or two to capture specific songs, I'm never invested in a way that the narrative arc is hitting me, right? Because I'm fast forwarding and play and then rewind it, listen to it again. So this was like, whoa, cool. And I liked the vibe from like for the first half of the record, but track 8, From the End of the World, is real funky. Like, it's got a different feel to it than the tracks before it, and then for the rest of the record, it was just fascinating. So I thought that was really cool. I don't know the arc quite like you do, but they've always been a very admirable outfit, and tackling concepts like technology in the future, and missing relationships from the past, and using a lot of technology to create some of their sound. Just an interesting band for sure. I'm glad you had it on your list. And so then from 81 we go to 1994, Wildflowers, Tom Petty, and this is his second of only 3 as a solo artist. Obviously he's got a bunch more with the Heartbreakers and other records with other projects too. 15 tracks, 62 minutes for this one. I've really been of late, for whatever reason, celebrating firsts on here on the podcast, and sometimes that means specifically to the lists that guests give me, and sometimes all of their artists are firsts, sometimes all of the records, and sometimes both. But this is, if I'm not mistaken, the first Tom Petty record to be on anybody's list.
Wow.
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Yeah. And the reason that I'm so excited about it, in '89, when I'm like already reckless and wild in terms of finances, as a person that's got a learner's permit, and about to be able to drive wherever I went legally. I mean, I was biking to the record store all the time, and however much money, I've got €10 left. What can I? So in '89, when Tom puts out Full Moon Fever, I immediately, Free Fallin' and Running Down a Dream and Won't Back Down are. I think they were all released as singles, but they're getting big exposure. So I buy a copy of Full Moon Fever and am hopelessly in love with it for the rest of my life, really. And then 2 years later, in '91, Tom and the Heartbreakers put out Into the Great Wide Open, which is magical. Is just so like it kind of gave me some assurance on accident about my outlook on life and beauty in the world and so on and so forth. And I was like, man, I didn't know it at the time, but just feeling like these two consecutive Tom Petty records have been some kind of medicine for me. And boy, I don't need Tom to do anything else for me for the rest of my life. I'm so grateful forever. And then 3 years later, Wildflowers comes out, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. Oh my God. And it's still, to find a friend. You said something earlier about, when I get to Tom Petty and something about to find a friend. But I mean, even today, I went back and listened to Only a Broken Heart. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely fantastic, but there are just portion. I could talk for 30 more minutes. And so all that to say this, like, who else has 3 times in a row given the world magic? And I always knew that, but boy, if it wasn't, a dumb American, dumb human experience when he passed, to be like, why is, I can't breathe. And it's like, oh, 'cause he gave me this, so you tell me about Tom Petty for you.
Yeah, I think that he's one of the greatest who's ever lived. I read this blog at a very vulnerable time in my life. I don't remember what it was called. It was just some girl's blog that she had published when she was also going through a really difficult time, and it was about her relationship with her father and with the men around her and how she didn't feel like she could trust any of them. And I had an experience working in a restaurant where I experienced a lot of sexual harassment.
20 years.
Yeah. It can be a rough place.
Yeah, I'm sure I was on the other end of that for you. Not trying to be,
Yeah.
just it was we can slap asses and make out, with consent, but we're gonna all do this dinner service, and then we're all gonna do some drugs and some drinks and some smooch. What? Just a whole, like, the waking 9 to 5 world doesn't.
Yeah.
But not. I don't mean to make light of that. The fact that happened to you, but
yeah. So I was 18 when I was working there, and that was, I would say that I had a pretty sheltered upbringing. I mean, my parents are practicing Catholics, and I wasn't going to parties like that in high school. And then suddenly I was going to these parties with my coworkers who, some of them who were quite a bit older than me. And I remember my first 2 weeks, there was this guy in his 40s who had the busboy ask me if I would go get dinner with him after our shift. And our shift ended at like 10 p.m. And I was like, no, I'm going home. And the busboy went back to him and the guy was like, well, I can drive her home. And I was like, I was just completely taken aback. I mean, no one had ever treated me like that before. And the things that were said to me in that environment and the ways that people put their hands on me and things like that. I mean, it was a really scary time. And I think that's also a time when, and for a lot of girls, it happens younger. And for me, I think it didn't so much because I wasn't out on my own a lot. But that's a time when the world is really starting to sexualize you, no matter how you dress, no matter how you present yourself. And so that was scary. And I was reading this blog from this girl who was a little bit older than me, but kind of going through the same things and had had a bunch of really awful experiences. And she was like, the thing that helps me is that I think of a couple of men who I don't know who have already died, so they can't do anything horrible. And they're men that I really admire. And both of hers were musicians. And she was like, I think of them as my ghost dads. And I think of them when I'm like, I cannot be surrounded by any men. I can't look at any men. I can't talk to any men. I'm so scared to leave my house. And she was talking about the ghost dads and how that made her feel better because she was like, these are men that I feel like I could trust. And I can listen to their music and I can acclimate myself to the idea of being around men again. And so for me, when I read that, I was immediately like, my ghost dad is Tom Petty.
I love that so much.
Tom Petty is someone who I would feel safe with in a room by myself. And Time to Move On was a big track in my life through all the changes of my life.
Whoa, that slide. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then the drum, the hi-hat comes in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And
go ahead.
no, I felt like he was there for me through a lot of the changes in my life, especially after he died in a way. And so almost no matter where I was going or what I was doing, if I found myself really freaking out, and I mean, I've suffered with anxiety throughout my life, but I think around that time when men started treating me like an object, that was a time of really heightened anxiety.
Late teens?
Late teens.
Okay.
Yeah. And so...
Send the busboy to
yeah.
do your dirty... Wow.
Yeah. And so
In what scenario is he like, she might say yes?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was he had made me chicken strips after a couple of my shifts, and he thought that entitled him to something. And he stopped making me chicken strips after I said no.
Okay.
Which I guess was like, shame on me.
This is a back of the house person?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had a lot of experiences like that. I worked at that restaurant for 2.5 years because the money was pretty decent. And I was like, I didn't have the KC scholars, or I didn't know that I had it at that point. And so I was like, I just need to tough it out. And that was a lot of the messaging that I was getting as well as a young woman was like, this happens to everybody. You need to tough it out. And, like grow thicker skin. This is going to happen no matter where you go, no matter what stage of your life you're in. So just deal with it. And I did that for a long time. And I think I would listen to Tom Petty a lot of the time when I was driving home, and I was trying to like calm my nervous system and reset. And I was like, okay, like I have to go back into work tomorrow. Like I'm going to relax. And I would listen to him, and I think he made most things feel a little bit better for me, and the world feel a little bit brighter.
That's great. That he was there for you and served that purpose. Not great that you had to go through that, of course. Yeah, were these chicken strips free?
They were free.
Okay. I mean, like, almost all of my years were chefing, running, and it's like, that's my food cost, dude. What do you do? There's people whose bonus potential are impacted every time you give away food. But this, it's that way in the bar end of things too. Bartenders can, give away booze if there's some personal gain, in whether that's, the more free drinks I give away, the bigger my tips are, or, maybe the hostess or this server will like me if I do that. I didn't ever really have any, one-on-one sorts of scenarios like that, but definitely like you know, after shift, like amongst the masses, right? Partying, and if something happens, great. If it doesn't, there's tomorrow, and then a day becomes a week, becomes a month, becomes a year, and so on and so a lot of that, but never. Anyway, it's there. I don't even think we've been through a pandemic and cancel culture and woke, what all these things. And I think if you went to most restaurants this Friday night, at 11:30, you would like, oh, this feels familiar. It's still here. I mean, I don't know, like, how do you fix that, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry that was an experience that you had, but I love that Wildflowers was, or Tom Petty, was there for you in that. I haven't paid much mind to anything of his that he put out after Wildflowers, and it like hurt to say that out loud. I definitely know like The Last DJ, Swingin'. I mean, there's a few tracks that I know really, really well, but I don't even know necessarily what record they're on.
Yeah.
Which, is something that I need to remedy. But he's, one of the greats.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember when this came, a lot of people in the moment in my life that I was around and living with and working with and so forth, when this came out, were very heavily impacted by it. And lots of people, I talk about by the time you finish a project, you're a different person by the time you're on project 3 than you were for project. I still, move through the weeks and months and come across people where they're like, yeah, Tom Petty, man, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I don't think that I knew all the stuff that he was going through, near the end. And I say this a lot on here, but there's never a shortage of examples to where you can say, be nice to people because you never know what they're going through. So anyway, super cool. And then from there we go to 2016 in the Magic Hour. Aoife O'Donovan.
Yeah.
2016, 4th of 10 for her, 10 tracks, 39 minutes. So we've gone Scotland to the UK to Florida, and now we're in Boston. She's got solo stuff, sometimes Y stuff, Crooked Still stuff, and I'm with her stuff. Who is this gal, and how did you discover her?
I got this advice, I think, from another blog that I was reading that was talking about how when you move somewhere completely different and you're in the process of packing up and you're on your flight or you're driving there, you should pick an album that you've never heard anything from before, and you should listen to that, because for the rest of your life, whenever you hear it, you'll come back to that moment in time.
Good
and
advice.
It'll kind of freeze it and memorialize it for you. And so I was looking at Irish American artists, and I found her, and just from the first track, I mean, she's just magical.
Yeah.
This album in particular is just magical. And having never been to Ireland, I knew that it was going to perfectly encapsulate what it would mean to me to be there. And I did find that when I was there, especially the Magic Hour. I mean, my grandparents really loved Ireland, and it's been really important to my family and all the trips that they've done there, and my aunt studying abroad there. And to hear her talking about her grandfather living there, and
oh, cool.
Yeah, and he had 27 grandchildren, and
Dang.
she was just one of them. And so in her interview, she talks about how when she was young, she never got any one-on-one time with him because there were so many of them, and they would all go and rent little houses on the beach for the summer, and they would all play together, all the cousins. But she didn't have one-on-one time with her grandfather till she grew up, and she began to discover what a wonderful person he was.
Cool.
And so for my grandparents, who both worked for TWA, my grandfather died a couple months after I was born, and I never got to properly meet him or learn much about him except from other people. And so I kind of thought about that as I was listening to the album. I mean, I'm going to this place that was so important to him and to the family that he created, and I want to acknowledge that, and she seemed like the perfect way to do it.
So you read this on this blog, and then you're looking at Irish American musicians. What is it about her that wiggled your antenna in the first place?
I think it has to be the album cover. That's so much like how my mom dressed me when I was a kid. You know, you'd have the little cardigan and the bow in the hair and the little Easter Sunday dress or the overalls, and you'd always wear tennis shoes with them because your mom was like, I don't want you wearing nice shoes when you're going to run around and get them dirty anyway. And she is there on the album, and there's another kid playing next to her, and I was just like, that's so reminiscent of me and my sisters, and how my mom would be like, okay, pose, I'm gonna take a photo, and someone would always be goofing off. So that's kind of what's happening on this album cover.
I love that. That's fantastic. So we go from a cute, sweet, innocent album cover art of one kind to cute, sweet, innocent, but occasionally blurred album cover of another kind in 2021 with Lorde's Solar Power. This is third of three for her, 12 tracks, 43 minutes, bringing it all home with a New Zealand appearance. And so with this artist, your perfect streak of firsts in terms of artists and albums comes to a crashing halt.
Really?
Because my good friend Sophia Reed for episode 95 had Pure Heroine on her list, which ironically was a very Taylor Swift heavy by design episode. And I, kind of last minute was like, are there any other that you want to talk? And she's like, yeah. And she gave me like 3. So we talked about all the Taylor records plus 3 non-Taylor records. And anyway, this was so good.
Yeah.
I was like, because, I don't know if Pure Heroine, I wasn't focused or if it just didn't grab me the same way, but I kind of was like, oh, a Lorde record, like, we'll see. Tell me your story with this one.
I grew up with Lorde,
okay.
So we're about the same age.
Okay.
I remember being in my middle school gym class, and we would run to Royals because the Royals had just won the World Series, and that was like a celebratory thing. It was like, go do laps while we listened to this song.
10 years ago, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, Lorde like created the sad girl pop that we know and love now. And so she was really at the forefront of that. And her 2 previous albums are amazing albums, but I felt like this one, I mean, it just felt like such an effortless shift for her from like encapsulating like where I was as a sad like middle schooler, like very angsty and like writing this Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan fiction, and like reading the Hunger Games and being like the world is such a dark place and I'm gonna have to grow up in it. And she was Ribs in particular, and like how she covered that experience of laughing with your friends and like being at a party, but then like at some point in the party your social battery runs out, and you're like, I want to go home. And then you get home and you're like, I am so alone. I was just with all these people and now I'm so alone, and like, what do I do? What am I doing with my life? And like these late night thoughts. And then she shifted to this, which is still a little bit of a sad album, because Stoned at the Nail Salon in particular, she's talking about kind of the same feeling of being around people but feeling like you're miles away and you're all alone and you have this bigger life. I mean, she talks about her dog and going out with her friends and like being on the beach and enjoying the sun, but she also talks about how when it comes down to it, like sometimes she is so wrapped up in her own thoughts that she is still just by herself in a sea of people. And that really spoke to me But I think this is a much more celebratory album about opening yourself up to enjoying life, even with the darker things that are going on. And even when you feel alone sometimes, it's okay to embrace that feeling, but it doesn't have to be the only feeling. And so I think that was a really beautiful transition for her as an artist. And I feel like we are right on the same track in our personal lives right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. I am, I'm only about somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 songs into the new Taylor record. So I need to finish and then get through it 2 more times before anything means anything that's coming out of my mouth. But so far, nothing is grabbing me, and it's feeling like a lot of similar, like
repetitive.
Like look, this is a new song now. I didn't even and that is not the case with this record. This record has a lot of. It's one of those phenomenons, and this means nothing because I've given it one listen. But it's sort of like each song is unique from the previous and has interesting different things happening in it, but they all fit together somehow. I'm probably going to, hopefully I can cleanse, wipe the hard drive and but I feel like I'm going to wind up saying this is a way better album than Tortured Poets, but neither here nor there. I just thought, I didn't realize it took hearing Sad Girl Pop out of your mouth twice to realize, oh yeah, that is it. And, she, I found myself both with this and with Pure Heroine thinking, like, I know she's from New Zealand, but it's like I get this little sense of like Olivia Rodrigo is trying to almost sound like her.
Yeah.
In the way that she, I don't know, lands on consonants or neglects them all. I don't know what it is exactly, but I feel like there's some similarity there.
Yeah. I'm an Olivia fan, but I do have to say, I think everyone is trying to emulate Lorde. And I do think that. I mean, I really think, and there's a lot of artists who are doing very unique things. I mean, earlier I mentioned Phoebe Bridgers, but I think artists like that as well benefited from her sound. I mean, she kind of paved the way, I think. And I don't know. I don't think anyone's doing it quite like her.
Cool.
I think there are people who are doing it well, but I think she was kind of there first, and she really took in the scene. I mean, back when Tumblr was a huge thing and people were venting online, I mean, she perfectly caught that mood of being an angsty teenager. And she, at 15, she released those songs.
Oh, really?
At 15, her first effort putting music out into the world. Okay. And it very much sounds like...
I thought Olivia's story was crazy as a junior or a senior or whatever.
Yeah, but it sounds... You can look back at it now and be like, yeah, that sounds like a 15-year-old. But that's what's so good about it, is because it's exactly what I felt like as a 15-year-old, because she was right there with me. And I think with this album as well, she is right there with us. And I think that's what people like about Olivia Rodrigo as well.
Yeah,
that's what my sister likes about her.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, great lists. Thank you so much for sharing it. And, you almost went a perfect artist and album firsts, but it was fantastic regardless. I usually wrap with a series of goofy questions, and then we'll get you out of here.
All right.
So if we all have some version of a bucket list, I tend to frame this in personal and professional. Maybe there's some overlap. Maybe some things are actually on. Anyway, if you're given all the resources to hammer out your number one personal and your number one professional, what would those be?
Number one professional would have to be, I've always wanted to be a children's book author.
Cool.
So I'd love to publish my own children's book. I think I really relate to children in a lot of ways. That's why I've been a summer camp counselor for like 5 years now.
Yeah. What's the That's another thing that really resonated with me on my still continuing writerish journey is award medals and awards like Caldecott and Newbery. I mean, there's
Yeah.
we used like first grade. You're like, whoa. I don't know what it was. It's like, because there's obviously lots of books in the world. And, even if you narrow it down to just the lens of children's books, there's a lot of those too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in that game. And so it always just struck me if, Stregonona or Where the Wild Things Are. If I ever got my hands on a book with
Yeah.
one of those seals, that it's like, oh, that's sorry.
Yeah.
Children's author, you work with kids a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I think if you can keep a kid's attention
Yeah.
for a book and make it a book that they want to come back to again and again and again, that's the highest form of achievement.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a writer. For me personally, I would love to become an Irish citizen.
Okay.
I really enjoy the lifestyle over there and the pacing and the people
Sure.
and the scenery. And I don't know, I think I keep a journal all the time, and so I kept a very detailed journal of my time there. And before I got over there, a couple months before, I wrote, "Home is Ireland, but I've never been." And then I got there and I was like, I was so right. This is home.
Oh,
this
wow.
this
Okay.
feels exactly like home.
Okay.
It feels like what I've been looking for.
Cool.
And so I think making my home there long term is
Nice.
a personal goal of mine.
I've been once, 20 years ago, probably February. Anyway, my ex sister-in-law was studying abroad, and so we went. She was in Galway. And we flew into Dublin, but then had to fly to. There's another town.
Shannon.
Shannon. It was confusing because whatever. But
Yeah.
we went to Galway and stayed with her and did some stuff, and then we had a car and we went like all the way around and made a week or 10 days, put like 1,000 miles on this car. Spent some time in County Cork. All of it was wonderful. I loved all of the places and almost all the people. But it was damp and chilly the whole time, and I kind of just run cold, and I feel like we, maybe you can correct me on this, but that this time of year, February is like the best it's gonna get, and the rest is like colder and chillier. And I was like, oh, like cool. I mean, there's no, and we hostel, bed and breakfasts for sure. Maybe I feel like everywhere we went, the sheets and the towel, everything was just a little damp.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no getting ahead of this. Like nobody's turning on heat, And I was like,
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life thinking about this place and my family, and then I get here and I'm like, oh, I can never live here. I need a little bit more warmth and dryness.
Yeah. I love the sun. My friends say that I'm like a plant. When the summer comes and the weather gets warmer, I really open up and I just seem a lot happier. But people over there, they're like, get a raincoat, get a good raincoat and just deal with it. And I think for me, I mean, I have a good raincoat now, and all the other upsides of it, it could not bother me less.
Here's it's still a profound, 20 years later, I feel like day one, wherever it was we went, we were shopping, and just there's lots of foot traffic. Every person I ever laid eyes on was squinting. And I was like, and I forgot my sunglasses. I'm like, and they're like, what? I was like, are there no sunglasses over here? Like, there's nobody has any. And I guess if there's no shops for me to go buy some in, it was just a funny little thing. It's like every single person, it's like, oh my God, I know how I'm going to make $5 million. No, I'm just joking. But those are great. Those are great. So, coffee with anyone you're choosing, dead or alive, who and why?
I almost have to say Tom Petty, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
I
mean,
really think just I think I could learn so much from him.
sure.
And I think it would be really healing for me
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Would you tell him that he was your ghost dad?
I would.
Okay.
I would.
Now, I've talked about this a number of times on here where, you're either imagining being in a situation like that, or sometimes folks have been in situations where they're with somebody, and it's like the scale changes, of course, with popularity and fame and so forth. But getting, if you have some time with a person that you've looked up to or idolized or been a fan of or whatever, like how do you maximize that time and somehow strip away the artist slash fan stuff and just hang out and be with the person?
Yeah.
I feel like that would be the easiest.
Yeah.
Like immediately he would, if you went all fanboy or fangirl, he'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to talk to him about, the back porch on his house and how it was built, he would,
Yeah.
So.
And I think Tom Petty, if you were like nervous about it, you could just like smoke weed.
Yeah.
Like Tom Petty, like he would be cool with
Yeah.
that. My friends and I have a Tom Petty Tarot Tuesday on his birthday.
Tarot Tuesday?
Tarot Tuesday.
Tarot Tuesday.
Yeah. So we do that pretty regularly anyway. We do tarot readings.
Okay.
But for Tom Petty, we do it on his birthday. And, like, we're like, Tom Petty would love this.
Yeah.
Like, he's such a chill guy. You could do just about anything with him,
Yeah. I did, speaking of, find it, like, what? When I saw that Lorde referred to Solar Power as her weed album.
Yeah.
I was like, you get high?
I know.
Then I started listening. I was like, oh, yeah. You get high. Okay.
Yeah.
Given the ability to visit your past self, any age you're choosing, what age are you choosing and what are you saying?
Yeah. In second grade, I started really, I don't know, I always had a pretty vivid imagination, but I would say second grade, I remember like staring at the books in the back of our classroom and looking at them and being like, man, I wish I could talk to future Lauren right now. And I don't know what was going on with me. I think that might have been kind of the beginning of when I started to have anxiety, but I was like, I wonder what future me would say to me. And throughout my life, I've written letters to myself, to my past self, to my future self, just reminding myself of things that I might have forgotten or things that I want myself to know. And a lot of that has been like, you need to forgive yourself. You did the best you could. Like in this instance right now, I'm telling you, like I did everything that I could. And so I think I'd go back to second grade before anything started to get rough. And when I was still a pretty happy kid, like just going along with whatever. And I think I'd just give her a hug and be like, you are right. I would be proud of you. And I am proud of you.
Oh, geez,
Yeah.
That's wonderful. In that, be nice because you never know what somebody else, the other piece to that, and perhaps it's obvious, is everybody, there are some bad people in the world, I guess, or people that have become less good because of circumstances or things that happen to them. But for the most part, folks are doing their best to get their needs met. Right. And your needs are going to be different from mine and different from the next gal and the next guy and so on and so forth. But really, that's what folks are doing. Like, so I don't know. It's just a thing to consider, especially, when it comes to thinking about yourself and where you were yesterday and where you are today and where you'll be tomorrow. It's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with reminding yourself to take it easy on yourself, right? Like, hey, you're doing the best you can. Like, it's okay. Love that answer. So I was pretty sure about most of the questions that I was going to ask you. And this one I had to spend a little time to be sure I wanted to include it. And it's kind of sort of been answered, but with so many similarities, I'm going to keep it on there. So Bob Stewart still is a professor at UMKC. New Letters.
Yeah.
That was his baby, and the radio side piece to that, New Letters on the Air, I think is the name of it. Anyway, I took I might have been my last semester, which was whatever, coincides with the portfolio and magazine editing is the name of this class, and he day one ish kind of put everybody in groups, and the end goal of the course is for everybody's got to create a magazine prototype, with staff and stories and photos and ads and artwork and so on and so forth. And he made I don't know if he chose or how, but each group gets an editor in chief. I got stuck with that, or was fortunate enough to, however, and I just remember him saying, people are so much more likely to be successful with consistent, gentle reminders. I mean, this is 2006 or 2007 when he said that, and I was like, in note-taking mode. Oh, I like that. I don't know why, but so anyway, I like that. I appreciate that. I know that there are people who, day one you're handed a syllabus, and you're obviously doing all the daily things, and this you can apply this to the workplace too. But the big project is due 3.5 months from today, and there are folks that every day they give a little bit of energy to that, and they start early, and it's by the time it's a week from due date, no stress because they've been done for weeks. Then there's folks that are like good, bad, or otherwise, under the heat and the pressure of procrastination, and especially if the writing deadlines, it's due at midnight or whatever. Where are you in the mix? Are you I can see all of the time that I'm going to allocate for this for months, or am I a procrastinator or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I do a lot of planning and pre-writing and brainstorming previous to a deadline.
Okay.
But I typically write everything right before the deadline. I think I benefit from a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
I think I do my best work then.
Yeah.
And
I'll bet that there's an air of confidence in the urgency because you have done all the pre.
Yeah.
So there's not really a lot of second guessing. Like,
Yeah. I like to give myself a lot of time to sleep on things. A lot of time.
Very wise.
To think about something. I mean, like, I'm thinking about writing almost all the time. So when I'm driving to work, I'm thinking about it. When I'm eating dinner, when I'm watching TV, I'm thinking about how would I write this scene instead. And so I'm constantly thinking about that. And then when it comes time to write, a lot of the time I don't really remember like the different phases of writing, because by that point I've thought about it so much that it just seems to flow. Like, it seems like things were, even with editing processes, it seems like things were going to be written that way no matter what. That they, like, that's how it was meant to be in my own voice, and that's how it was going to come out.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Complete this for me, please. The world would immediately become a better place in which to live if only...
I'd say if only everyone had basic human rights. Seems like a low bar, but I mean, you'd think. And then you look around, and that's a big part of where I got so anxious and so disturbed as a kid, because I was like, what do you mean some people don't have somewhere to live? Like, what do you mean some people don't have enough to eat? It just, I think it still blows my mind that there are some people with so much and then others with practically nothing. And it seems like at this point we would have figured that out. So basic human rights would be great.
Lauren Textor, thank you so very much. Lauren.Colette on Instagram. There, at least today, maybe not by the time this comes out, you can access all of your pitch stuff via a link in there. What am I leaving out?
My muck rack
Your
profile,
muck rack
is
profile.
under my own name, Lauren Textor.
Okay.
Substack,
Substack.
laurentinaandfuzz.substack.com.
laurentinaandfuzz.substack.com.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anything that you had hoped we would cover that we didn't?
I think we covered just about everything. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did.
So,
we did.
yeah, thrilled to have been here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time and hope to talk to you soon. But at the same time, wishing you well for everything that's just on the other side of the hill. And it sounds like a lot of fun stuff. And I suspect that you'll be happy and successful in all of it. So
yeah,
thanks
thank
again.
you so much.
You bet.